That name, Jerry Garcia, will always be linked to an age that was both enchanted and rebellious. He wasn't annoying. His actions were not impressive. Jerry played the guitar and had a wild spirit that wouldn't be tamed. Among the Grateful Dead members, he was the unofficial boss. It was the band's tours that started a whole cultural movement, and there is still a dedicated group of Deadheads today. Jerry didn't just play music. He took psychedelic rock, bluegrass, blues, and folk and made them sound like new things. Similar to Jerry's life, the Grateful Dead were known for playing non-stop concerts that ran more than 5 hours and didn't follow a set list. When the stage lights went down, though, he went back to a very different world. Heroin abuse, broken families, comas caused by drugs, and a growing feeling of being alone are all problems. Jerry said, "I can't go outside," at one point. "People recognize me." His life was a dance between being inspired by art and destroying himself, between leaving an indelible mark and wounds that never really healed. He used music to paint as an artist, but also brought himself down by the attention he helped bring on himself. What made a boy whose father died when he was 5 years old into an untouchable figure for a whole generation? Is there a lonely side to the famous music that no one is brave enough to face? Join us as we find out the story of Jerry Garcia that has never been told. He lived, loved, made, and paid the price. Beginnings. In the years after World War II, America was still in a fog when Jerome John Garcia was born in San Francisco on August 1st, 1942. He was the second son of Jose Ramon Joe Garcia, a Spanish-born clarinet and saxophone player, and Ruth Marie, a Swedish-American nurse. Jerry grew up in a home with members from different cultures. There was music, hard work, and a steady silence. His dad, Joe Garcia, used to be the leader of neighborhood dance bands. Unfortunately, he stopped playing music after a fight with the players' union and started running a bar instead. Ruth, Jerry's mother, stopped working as a nurse after she got married to help run the business. Although their small family didn't stay calm for long. Jerry was hurt badly when he was 4 years old and chopping wood with his bigger brother. The edge of an axe cut off his middle finger on his right hand. Jerry's accident changed his body in a way that would never go back to normal. It was the first sign that his life would never be normal. Tragically, the real bad thing happened a year later. Jerry, who was 5 years old at the time, went fishing with his dad. It was a normal morning until Joe slipped and drowned in front of Jerry. Jerry was stuck there and couldn't do anything. His first traumatic event wasn't the death of his father. That event left him with a mental void that he would try to fill with drugs, music, and a never-ending tour schedule. His mother kept running the bar, but she didn't have much time to take care of her 2 boys. Jerry spent 5 years living with his grandparents in the neighborhoods of Santa Cruz. He didn't have a father figure in his life and was far away from his mother. There were also long, quiet periods. For Jerry, moving back in with his mother's new family after her second marriage in 1953 felt like a breakup that would never go away. Over the next few years, Jerry moved around a lot, going to different schools and houses and never really making friends or bonding with anything except art. The boy, who used to be shy, started to excel at drawing and playing music. At age 15, his mom gave him a guitar, which changed everything. Jerry became completely hooked on records and taught himself how to play, playing for hours every day. However, school was always hard. Several schools kicked him out. He had to start 8th grade all over, and he finally quit high school when he was 17. Because Jerry didn't have a plan, a future, or a leader to help him, he joined the army to start over. But he was fired less than a year later for breaking rules too many times. When he was 18, Jerry Garcia was lost, hurt, and had unspoken scars. He only had a guitar, a few fuzzy memories, and a strong desire to avoid reality. No one would have thought that the young man who had lost his father to the current, his finger to an accident, and his place in society because he refused to follow the rules would one day become a major force in the lives of a whole generation. However, Jerry may have felt the need to make a new world through music because he didn't fit in with this one. Beginners in their careers. After getting out of the army in 1960, Jerry Garcia went back to the one thing that had always made him feel like he belonged: music. Listen to music. Even though he didn't have any money or clear goals, he found something even more important in Palo Alto: a community. Palo Alto is known for its free-spirited creativity and is close to Stanford University. Garcia went to coffee shops, bookshops, and art galleries where dreamers and outcasts were quietly making art on their own terms. This is where he met Robert Hunter, a young artist with a very open mind and a great ear. They began to play music together, but not many people paid attention to them. However, would go on to write many classic songs for the Grateful Dead. Folk and bluegrass music caught on again in the early 1960s. Garcia really got into these types of music. He learned to play the banjo and guitar and really got into traditional American music. He was in a few short-lived bands with strange names like the Sleepy Hollow Hog Stompers, the Wildwood Boys, and the Heart Valley Drifters. But Jerry got better at what he did and tried new things there without any limits. In 1963, Garcia met Sarah Ruppenthal, a student at Stanford who played the guitar with same style as Garcia. They got married quickly and started acting as Jerry and Sarah at small events and in schools. It was probably the only time in Jerry's life when things were stable. He took some time away from life on the road to teach music at Dana Morgan Music Store and take care of his daughter Heather. Garcia hated being still, though. He went back to singing in 1964, this time with Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Champions, a jug band. Teenage guitarist Bob Weir and Ron Pigpen McKernan were in the band, and they brought a raw blues energy to it. As the Beatles and the rock and roll craze spread across America, Garcia and his friends could feel a new wind coming. After playing their traditional instruments, they picked up modern guitars, drums, and keyboards. As Mother McCree's and the Warlocks left the jug band, it turned into a rock band. By late 1965, they had a new name: the Grateful Dead. The story goes that Garcia found the name by opening a book by accident. Those dreadful days. When people do a good act, it frees the spirits from their pain. Strange, spiritual, and against the system. It was the ideal name for a band that didn't follow any rules. From the start, the Grateful Dead never did things the same way twice. Like other bands, they didn't practice, so their shows weren't very well put together. They were looking into things. And the leader of every trip was Jerry Garcia, who had dreamy eyes and a beard that wouldn't stay in place. Their first single, which came out in 1966, had two electric folk songs called Stealin' and Don't Ease Me In. At the same time, Garcia helped Jefferson Aeroplane record Surrealistic Pillow. He came up with the album's name and played guitar on a few tracks, but his contract didn't allow him to be officially recognized. He was named the spiritual and musical advisor instead. It was an odd title, but it fit him exactly. That was the start of Jerry Garcia's career. They started out in coffee shops in Palo Alto and played in nameless garage bands. All of a sudden, they became a sign of countercultural music. A man with a guitar looking for an honest sound to fill the void inside him. No official training, no marketing plan, and no carefully crafted image. Somehow, a whole generation followed. A successful career. Late in 1965, when the Grateful Dead became a real band, Jerry Garcia was 23 years old. His looks weren't the best or his voice wasn't the best, but he was the soul of the group. When Garcia started making music, it wasn't just a list of chords. It was a wave that was free, unmeasured, uncontrolled, and totally real. When the Grateful Dead were young, they played like they didn't care about any of the rules of music. A chaotic style full of eerie noise, LSD, and deep immersion. By 1970, though, the band was tired from touring all the time and having money problems, so they went back to playing simpler, more traditional music. This is when Garcia's creativity reached its peak. It all changed with the 1970 album Working Man's Dead. Simple, folk rock music that is very real. The gentle song Uncle John's Band was written by Garcia and Robert Hunter. It's about friendship, forgiveness, and the need for community. Garcia didn't just write about psychedelic images in songs like High Time and Casey Jones. He also wrote about the effects of those visions. A few months later, American Beauty came out, and Garcia's music took off. Ripple was a prayer composed of music. Artists like Counting Crows, La Lovett, and Ramblin' Jack Elliott have covered Friend of the Devil, a song about running away from your guilt. This album showed that the Grateful Dead didn't need hit songs to become famous. They only needed a real heart. Almost all the time, the Grateful Dead were on tour. There were no set lists they had to stick to. Every show was its own world, made in real time based on the mood, atmosphere, and mental state of each musician. Garcia, in particular, he could be alone in the shadows and play quietly for almost an hour, then all of a sudden start playing a 15-minute solo. The 1,000-person crowd didn't need any greetings or hit songs. The people came to see Jerry take raw feeling out of each string. Grateful Dead shows usually ran 3 to 5 hours because of this, and many unofficial recordings became holy books for Deadheads. The band put out Europe's 72 in 1972. It was a live triple record with new songs like Brown-Eyed Women, He's Gone, and Tennessee Jed, all of which were written by Garcia. Because Garcia didn't want to be limited to the Grateful Dead, he made the Jerry Garcia Band, a place where he could play his own music. Here he sang Chuck Berry, Dylan, and soul, reggae, and funk songs. The JGB was Garcia's quiet speech, while the Dead was a group trip. Besides that, he worked with keyboardist Merle Saunders, making unplanned jam sessions that were different from anything else being recorded at the time. Fans of strange, cross-genre music loved albums like Live at Keystone and Heavy Turbulence. Garcia played with new people who wrote for the Purple Sage as well, country rock band with a lot of horse influence. He played the extremely hard and expressive pedal steel guitar on their 1971 debut album. He mastered it, as he did everything else he touched. But being brilliant made people mentally and physically tired. Garcia was hooked on drugs by the middle of the 1970s. Members of the Grateful Dead had to change their tour plans and cut the length of shows because they were afraid he wouldn't make it. Jerry would sometimes show up on stage as a shadow, speaking only once and playing the same sounds over and over again. Fans kept thinking the talent was still there, they just thought he or she was asleep. He fell into a diabetic and drug-induced sleep in 1986 and spent weeks in the hospital, barely making it. We were woken up. But it was also a warning that Garcia had changed into something bigger than a man. No one asked him, "Do you still want to go on?" when he woke up, saying, "You have to," instead. "You're needed." At the start of the 1990s, Garcia stopped performing all the time. He went back to playing acoustic music and country, which were his first loves when he was a teenager. He made albums with mandolinist David Grisman called Garcia, Grisman, and Not for Kids Only. These albums were quiet and introspective. They were no longer about chasing hallucinations, but about the music of a man who had walked through a desert and was now resting under a tree. Jerry Garcia didn't have a top 10 hit, but he performed more than 2,000 times, wrote hundreds of songs that people still remember, and built a community of millions of people who still call him by his name, not as a pop star, but as a guy. He did well not because he took over the market, but because he never went into it. One-person show. While the Grateful Dead were at the height of their fame in 1972, Jerry Garcia quietly put out his first record as a solo artist. It was called Garcia. Even though there wasn't any big advertising or polished pictures for the record, it had some of the most honest and important parts of him on it. Garcia himself played almost all of the instruments. He played the guitar, bass, piano, and pedal steel, but Bill Kreutzmann, his longtime bandmate, played the drums. Over time, songs like Sugary, Deal, and Loser would become mainstays of both Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia band shows. This wasn't a record looking outward. Garcia was alone with his thoughts while music played in the background. He had no one to answer to or defend, no other sounds than his own state of mind. After 2 years, he put out Compliments, a collection of cover songs that, even though they seemed simple, showed Garcia's inner world. The record, which had songs by Bob Dylan, Chuck Berry, Smokey Robinson, vintage soul, and blues standards, wasn't meant to show off skill. It was meant to show heart. He chose each song not to impress, but to remember what had made him happy before he picked up a guitar. The title of the record came from a sticker on the first pressing that said, "Compliments of Garcia," which made it sound like Garcia was giving the listeners a small gift without making a big deal out of it. In 1976, Garcia released Reflections, a sad and nostalgic work after years of traveling and getting more and more hooked on drugs. The Dead's dynamic lead singer seemed to fade in songs like They Love Each Other and Comes a Time. In its place is a worn-out man looking for meaning in broken relationships, missed opportunities, and reunions that never happened. The album had members of both the Jerry Garcia Band and the Grateful Dead. It was almost like Garcia himself wasn't sure where he fit in, but he had to keep making music to stay balanced. He put out Cats Under the Stars in 1978. Garcia himself called it his favorite record. That was one of the few times he gave a solo work his full attention, pride, and hope. Truthful artists don't always get rewarded, though. The record did not do well at the stores and was almost forgotten when it came out. But for people who are willing to wait and listen, it is still a hidden gem where Garcia played not out of duty or theory, but out of love of sound and kindness of spirit. Although Cats Under the Stars wasn't a statement, it was a word in the night. In addition to studio records, Garcia created a whole new world of live performances with the Jerry Garcia Band. In the Grateful Dead, every show was a huge jam because everyone expected so much from them. JGB, on the other hand, let him slow down, sing favorite songs, mix soul and reggae, bring gospel to the stage, and breathe without worrying about letting anyone down. He wasn't in charge in JGB. He was part of the flow, not to lead, but to follow. Besides that, he had professional friendships with whom he worked together without any stress. Garcia played jazz and funk-influenced jams in small bars with Merle Saunders. He went back to using only acoustic instruments on records like Garcia, Grisman, and Not for Kids only with his old bluegrass friend David Grisman. These tracks aren't for everyone. Garcia played mandolins, had a gravelly voice, and told stories that didn't have a clear beginning or end. It was like he was playing for a group of old friends in an attic. It wasn't about showing anything during Jerry Garcia's solo career. Some people did it to get away from the Grateful Dead or try to become famous in a different way. He needed that quiet place because his life was so loud all the time. There, he could play like a child again, not worried about making mistakes or trying to be right. He wasn't carrying the weight of being a sign. He was just a man looking for peace in every chord. Jerry Garcia left behind his most honest music in those quiet, modest times, not to become famous, but just to live. Life outside of music. Jerry Garcia's music career was like a symphony of freedom, but his personal life was like a bunch of broken riffs that were sometimes sweet, sometimes messy, and never really ended. For Jerry, love never went in a straight line. It came and went quickly and quietly, leaving behind knots that no one, not even him, could untie. His first marriage was to Sarah Ruppenthal in 1963, and his first guitar partner when they were both students at Stanford and playing folk music in Palo Alto. Heather was their daughter, and she went on to become a traditional violinist. But they split up quickly, not because of a big fight, but because Jerry was always moving, always going in a new direction, and always after something that was just out of reach from home life. According to Sarah, I couldn't hold on to someone who wasn't grounded. Next, he dated Carolyn Adams for more than 10 years. Adams was known as Mountain Girl and was a counterculture star who used to live with Ken Kesey. While they never got married in the traditional sense, they did have 2 girls together. Annabelle was born in 1970, and Teresa was born in 1974. Mountain Girl knew Jerry better than anyone else. He had her by his side when the Grateful Dead became internationally famous. His descent into heroin addiction, the exhausting trips, and the many times he shut the world out and got lost in music. Still, Jerry couldn't stay, even with her. In the early 1980s, he got even more addicted to drugs and started dating a young director named Deborah Coons. His family was very upset about the connection. The Deadhead group became divided, and Mountain Girl and the kids felt like they were left behind. Others didn't want to see this new woman next to their idol. Jerry, as usual, didn't say anything to explain or say sorry. He only did what his feelings told him to do, and his feelings never kept their word. For years, Garcia went back and forth between the two women. In 1994, just 1 year before he died, he officially married Deborah Coons. His short-lived marriage led to a long, nasty series of court cases between his official wife and his ex-partners, as well as between his children and his estate managers. Unless your name was Jerry Garcia, this was a mess of lawsuits that had never happened before in rock history. But it wasn't the cases that broke my heart. After 30 years of quiet, his daughter Trixie Garcia told everyone. At his funeral, she stood up and said bluntly, "My father was a bad dad." The remark was shocking at the time, but in later interviews, Trixie clarified she wasn't condemning him, but stating a painful truth wrapped in love. That Jerry, inspirational to millions, couldn't be there when his daughter needed him. That there were phone calls between father and daughter cut short because he fell asleep mid-conversation from heroin. That there were times he gave her money, sent her off to pick up supplies, then retreated back into his private room, one no one was allowed to enter except Trixie. She called him her best friend, someone she loved deeply, but also the person who hurt her the most. And for that reason, she chose not to follow his path. She and her sisters rejected drugs, rejected the stage, and rejected the kind of slow death masked as an artist's life. They chose authenticity. They chose sustainable business. They chose to build their father's legacy not as worship, but as awareness. Jerry Garcia was never a model father, never an ideal husband, and never tried to be anything other than himself. His life was a string of unfinished relationships, passionate but abruptly ended, deeply connected yet rarely present. He didn't build a proper family, but he built a community. He didn't keep a home together, but he kept the spirit of a generation intact. That was the tragedy and the truth of a man who lived only through music, but whose music left him no room to be a father, a husband, or a lover in any traditional sense. To Jerry, personal life was never life after the stage. It was an extension of it, a space where he played, while quietly missing the most important parts. Final years and legacy. By the time he entered the 1990s, Jerry Garcia was no longer the youthful artist with a guitar slung over his shoulder, dreamy eyes, and hundreds of shows ahead of him. He was a man burdened by decades of accumulated weight, diabetes, the aftermath of heroin and cocaine use, exhaustion from thousands of tours, and personal relationships that had long fallen apart. And yet, strangely, he kept going. Not for fame, not out of duty to the Grateful Dead, but because music was the only thing he had left. After falling into a coma in 1986, Garcia woke as if he had been drained of life. Doctors said he had crossed the line between life and death, and those close to him knew he was no longer the same. His health was clearly declining. His body grew heavier, his skin pale, his breathing labored. Still, he returned to the stage. Quieter now, slower, but clinging to the last remnants of what used to be brilliance. In his final decade, Garcia avoided long tours and turned back to acoustic and bluegrass, the sounds he had first fallen in love with as a teenager before losing his father. Albums like Garcia, Grisman, and Not for Kids Only were soft, humble works, no longer filled with psychedelic dreamscapes, but with the quiet reflections of someone who had lived through every extreme and now longed for peace. But even that peace was fragile. Despite multiple attempts at rehab, Garcia remained susceptible to relapse. By then, his body could no longer handle the toll. Every performance became an extraordinary effort, not to impress, but to prove he could still be Jerry Garcia, if only for a fleeting moment. By 1995, his health had rapidly deteriorated. On August 8th, he checked into the Serenity Knolls rehab facility in Forest Knolls, California, quietly without media attention. But the next morning, August 9th, 1995, Jerry Garcia died in his sleep from a heart attack. He passed away without stage lights, without a guitar, without a crowd, just him and the final end to a journey that had never truly rested. His death sent a shockwave across the nation, not just among fans, but throughout America. A part of counterculture, a generation, a symbol of freedom was gone. Thousands gathered in cities across the country. San Francisco, New York, Boulder. Not to mourn a celebrity, but to mourn a piece of their own youth. Sleepless nights, healing songs, shared tears and music that needed no comforting words. But Jerry Garcia didn't just leave behind a band, a few solo albums, or the paintings exhibited after his death. What he left was a way of life, a spirit, a community that endured beyond him. The Grateful Dead became Dead and Company, with former members still performing to keep the flame alive. Bootleg recordings of his shows, even on fuzzy cassette tapes, were traded like sacred texts among deadheads. Generations born after his death still found pieces of themselves in his lyrics and solos he played under midnight skies. And it was his daughters, especially Trixie Garcia, who turned that legacy into something not just remembered, but lived. Trixie didn't become a musician. Instead, she chose to preserve the Garcia name through deeply personal projects, from curating his artwork exhibitions to launching the Garcia hand-picked cannabis line to producing documentaries about his life and philosophy. No idolizing, no myth-making. She told the truth. Garcia as a genius, fragile, complex, and relentlessly authentic. Jerry Garcia once said he didn't like being seen as a spiritual leader. He just wanted to play music. But his music, whether he intended it or not, guided an entire generation through war, rebellion, freedom, and disillusionment. He didn't write anthems of triumph. He wrote for the lost, the aching, the ones unsure how to begin again. And for that he still lives, through memories, old speakers, and a community that never faded even after its founder was gone. Jerry Garcia died at 53, but what he created has never aged. Jerry Garcia's story isn't just a chapter in music history. It's a journey full of contradictions. Between creativity and self-destruction, between glory and the personal voids that not everyone dares to face. If you believe that Jerry Garcia, with all his unfinished pieces, still deserves to be remembered as one of the most influential artists of the 20th century, please like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next stories. When was the first time you heard Ripple or Friend of the Devil? Share it in the comments, because sometimes just one song can bring back an entire lifetime. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Goodbye.